Okay, good morning, G fans. This is basically about our history and how it came to be and where it's likely to go in the future. So this is one of our logos that we've had created. We have a number of very creative people in our ranks, and so we're always trying new things. So Dojo Studios is obviously not a real studio. We exist really in any substance. We only really exist at GFEST, but throughout the year we interact with each other on our own secret Facebook page. But let's dive into the story. I call this manufacturing a myth. So GFEST in and of itself has always been an opportunity for Western fans to experience things that they can't otherwise see here in the United States or Canada or wherever outside of Japan. And that goes for everything from meeting guests to buying products to just being able to say, oh yeah, I like this about a Godzilla movie, and everybody doesn't go. So this is another part of this. The costume competition was something I was asked to take over announcing names for back in, doing the MC thing back in 2006. And as that went along, we had we'd have maybe 15 costumes, that would come out. And they were, mixed bags. Some were very clearly homemade first times. And some people had some really, you were like, wow, what have you been doing with yourself? They were really quite good. And so things sort of led in this direction. In 2010, it sort of led to the point where we decided, let's put some of this on film, because we tried a few little short skits during the costume parade with some kids dressed up as Kamacuras and another kid dressed up as Baby Godzilla. And then one of our founding members, Billy DuBose, made his first appearance in his Godzilla suit at that time. He came out and he rescued Minya from the Kamacuras, Kamakuri, from them. And so we decided to make this video. We thought, what could we make it about? Well, so one of the things that we had thought about is the fact that GFan was asked by Toho back in the mid to late 90s to not use any of their characters or properties in fan fiction. And to me, making videos about things is fan fiction because we're not a regular studio, we're not licensing anything, so we chose to observe that. So how would we do something yet keep it relevant and relatable to people who remember, oh yeah, because they always say, you can believe a lie if it's mostly true. Or something like that. So we picked things that were familiar to people from, hi G Fantas. We're going to get into where he came from too. If you take elements that people understand and have seen before and are familiar to them and you weave them in new ways, many times it's like, oh yeah. It's kind of like most people who like Godzilla also like Gamera because there's the same kind of elements. The big, the reptile, the city, all of those things. So we decided to weave together the idea of the old Shogun Warriors toys. Does anyone remember those from back in the 70s? Mattel made them. They were about this tall, were the really largest ones, and they had like firing fists and that sort of thing. So I took a Shogun Warriors Godzilla and I changed it into G-Fantas. So we made this Dojo Warriors G-Fantas toy, and we built this whole commercial around it. So we liked it so much and we wanted to do it again and again and again. But again, you realize we had to stay away from licensed properties, things that we loved, but ultimately they belong to someone else and they protect them. So we got clever. We had the fortune to be on G Tour one year. And one of the temples we went to in Kyoto is this one, where this picture was taken from, I believe it was Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. And we were out, we knew what we knew where we were going on the tour, and so we made sure we got to the same vantage point, took the same picture, and then we green screened GFEST into it. And that's kind of what we've done with Dojo. We've basically taken that whole genre, but we put our own things into it, but combining elements from the Gamera films, Ultraman shows, and Godzilla films. So we started out, in 2010, there was a gentleman named Jolyon Yates, who's a very talented artist, who put together a calendar that came out with an issue of GFan, and it had all these sort of fake movie posters from movies that were never made, but centered around GFantis instead of Godzilla. This happens to be one from Mecha GFantis Backfires. So our first film, we did GFantis versus Thing, not The Thing, just Thing. And that was where we have a monster called Shirakuna, which is, I'll show you pictures of later. And then the next one we did was Mecha GFantis Backfires. And so we did a couple with this calendar, using that idea as an inspiration, but then we sort of went in a different direction. This is the original GFantis suit. This was made by J.D. Lees, the gentleman who started GFEST and GFan. And that suit is now retired in a headless fashion back at J.D.'s Canada home. One thing that is confusing to people is that when they see our videos, it'll say, they'll notice that the films were made here at GFEST in this room in 2011 or 2012 or 2013 or whatever. But if you look at the very end, it'll say copyright Dojo Films 1964 or copyright Dojo Films 1975. And the idea that we're trying to do is, like that calendar, create a false history, a myth of a studio that has produced these things and yet for some reason doesn't exist today. And these films are not full-length films, they're very brief videos. And so we describe them as restored videos. Now how did that happen? Why did that happen? Sorry. Why did they have to be restored? Creating this myth allows us to restore them and meet certain criteria. We can make them short, they don't have to cost a lot of money, and they add to this sense of mystery. Now the thing is, in this parallel universe, we combine these things, and that includes things from the real world. In the Dojo universe, who remembers back in 1995, was it 95, might have been 94, when the Kobe earthquake happened? It really did. But in the Dojo universe, that happened earlier, and it destroyed Dojo Studios, which was located in Kobe. So everything was lost. And so we are now, in our mythology, recreating and restoring this stuff that had been thought lost forever, but has now been found. An example of how we tie these things in together, Shirakuna, as I spoke of, is a combination of Ghidorah and this middle monster, Rion, from the Marvel Comics Godzilla series. And this is him. He's got 3 tails instead of 3 heads. He's bronze and scaly instead of gold and scaly. And he's got these energy wings that allow him to rise on a sort of gravitational field. And this is the actual suit. And it's kind of funny because he looks more like Shin Godzilla in a lot of ways. And yet this was about 10 years before Shin Godzilla was released. King Usagi is another one of ours that we've created a myth out of. He is a rabbit in samurai armor, and that is a combination of King Caesar and Daimajin. And this is King Usagi, means the rabbit king. He has a sort of evil twin, but not really. But the film that they were in, War of the Colossal Beasts, which is also a ripoff of War of the Colossal Beast, is in many ways similar to the struggle that you saw in War of the Gargantuas. And there are some scenes. Who remember, did you see the War of the Colossal Beasts? Okay, there's a scene in that is very similar to a scene in War of the Gargantuas involving a lounge singer. So Demon Jin, this kaiju, is basically Gyra, the green gargantua. So we have quite a number of kaiju that have been originally created. This is Kiruda, who was built, the blue one, who was built by Jake Baker, who was also the one who built the GFEST suit that you just saw. That was and we've gotten some fairly deep themes, like deep senses of loss and tragedy, and even wiping out species entirely. And we've tried to have these themes in here to make it more than just, you hear the music, here comes the monster, here come the tanks, and we kill them. And we've been, I like to think we've been fairly successful with that. Even some aspects of horror, which will start to occur in phase 2. Now, when I talk about phase 1 and phase 2, I haven't mentioned that since the first slide. Phase 1 is the Showa era of Dojo films. Now, everyone's familiar with the Showa era Godzilla films, which is the ones from the 60s and 70s up to Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. But shortly after that, in the Dojo verse, the Kobe earthquake hit and destroyed Dojo Studios. So there are no Heisei era Dojo films. But starting now, a couple of years back, we started the first real-time Dojo film with breaking news. We released that last year here at GFEST. So if you look at all of them, watched from the beginning to the end, they tell a story with some characters that recur throughout. Some, like Empress Zagi, Princess Kumi. Princess Kumi is the one who holds the rabbit up and says, and summons King Usagi. Empress Zagi is the evil one who's always trying to take over with her monster horde. Dr. Brent and Dr. Scott are also recurring characters. And Dr. Rex Summerall is a character who you'll see in GFAN with the Journal of Dr. Rex Summerall. We actually talked to Skip Peel, the author of that fan fiction, who incidentally was asked also not to include Toho characters in his stories anymore. And we said, hey, how'd you like to do a gig with Dojo? So he has this recurring commentary role as Dr. Rex Summerall, and it's been a lot of fun having him on board with that too. And of course, the kaiju and the heroes many of them have appeared in multiple Dojo videos. So we talked again about phases 1 and 2. This is what we've done. So phase 1 was filmed indoors here on a closed, on an indoor set with either backdrops or a green screen that we made. It's a gigantic green screen. And in terms of projects, we've done everything from the toy commercial all the way down to GFantis versus Rayman X, which has not yet been released, but we expect it to come out right around the holiday season this year. It's one of those things where all this together forms a story. Who was here last year? Did you manage to catch the Go-Go Riser Shogun stage show? We tried to do something different. In Japan, one of the things that they do frequently for all sorts of licensed properties is that they will have these road shows. And you'll go into a festival hall and there'll be a room set up almost exactly like this. There'll be a stage, there'll be costume characters running around with some drama. They have special effects. They'll usually have a narrator who's trying to not only tell you the story, to so you can understand what they're doing, but also get the audience reaction going and whatnot. And it's a really energetic thing, so we tried to do something different. So this is not something you will ever see on video per se, although there is a sort of camcorder version that someone was nice enough to post on the internet that you can see as well. It's also on the Dojo Studios Facebook page, the official recording of it. And that. So as we said, there was no Heisei period. Dojo Studios, its physical being was wiped out. And so one of our editors, the guy who kind of does most of our finishing and all of our tech support here at GFEST, said, you know what, let's try this. So he's the one who kind of started this idea of going down this road of restored work. And he put a grainy, sort of like scratched finish on the version of GFantas versus Thing, along with the preface that in 2011, a group of dedicated G-fans found these films and set to work restoring them. This is the product of those efforts. And it kind of stuck with us, and it's just sort of evolved into this fake history. Phase 2 has actually already begun, even before Phase 1 has ended. Now, Nick also wrote and filmed and edited and directed and produced and, well, anyway, he is a true engine of creativity. And his first entry into the Reiwa series is Breaking News. Now this is shot in a very different way from Phase 1. Phase 1, again, was shot in here, on a set with backdrops. But when you look at other kaiju films for inspiration, we also looked at technique. And you look at the Gamera films from the 90s, which were largely shot, in many cases, outside against a natural sky on an elevated stage. That's something we want to try. And we started out with Breaking News being shot out in the world instead of here on this set. And it really had a look that we liked. It was a look that marked a turning point, a different creative sort of emphasis on the aesthetics of it, and that's what we're going with. So next year, you're gonna see us out in the parking lot shooting on these stages with a built-up city with monster suits against a natural sky, and probably sweating quite a bit more than we are today. So Phase 2 started with Breaking News. It's moving to the next one that's shot next year called Rayman War, and eventually ends up in 2022 with Yokaiju Tanjo, which is something I'll let you all Google to figure out what that means. Yokaiju is two words combined of yokai and kaiju. And so take that in your put that in your memory and see what you think and see if we meet your expectations. So doing this stuff is not easy, and there's a reason fan films are not being done by everybody everywhere all the time. They're expensive, and a lot of times when these projects have tried to be done, they involve money. They involve time. People's egos get involved, and unfortunately those are also reasons that they tend to fall apart before they're finished. People don't have time to dedicate to things, to traveling to a place centrally, day in, day out, or week in, week out. But through the advent of digital technology, we've been pretty lucky, and it happened that we were born right around the time that digital technology started to allow things like file transfer, editing on, software that you could attain. Basically, Dojo is something that we created, and it's basically a sandbox where very talented people come and they work on things utilizing their talents to contribute to a larger product. And we all have input. We had a big imagining session last night as to what the rest of the course for Phase 2 was going to kind of be like, what elements were going to be in it, and trying to figure out how we were going to guide the story forward. And it was quite productive in the sense that, it got people engaged, and, we all sort of engaged quite willingly with this. One of the things I think one of our founding members, Sherry, mentioned is, on a certain level, to be in Dojo, you're almost having to be willing to give away the rest of the convention. And yet we have a really, really good time doing it. And it's because it's fun that we do it. How often do you get to see a talented suit maker using his talent, weaponizing his suit against a talented Japanese special effects director? And it's all fun. We all had a really good time. It was probably one of the proudest moments I've ever had, that one of the best sets we've ever built happened to be done on the year that Koichi Kawakita came and visited us. And he came to our set and he spent about an hour in here and had fun with us. And we had fun with him. And it's one of those magical sort of things that you just don't get in everyday life. So I talked a little bit, I just use this as a loose guide and, as I'm talking. Throughout the year, there are those of us who are involved in pre-production, which is the developing of the story, the building of the sets, the building of the props, and then we transport them here. And they've come from places like Canada and Arkansas and Wisconsin, a lot of places where, you have to either have a trailer or you have to have something that collapses and that can be set up again very quickly. So if you look at our photo op scene back there, all those buildings are basically flat, yet they create a very nice illusion. And that's what this is all about. It's about illusion and suspending your disbelief. I think we can all agree that some of the films that they do now, which are very heavily CGI'd, sometimes are lacking somewhat in a certain soul. And we try to have the soul. We also try to make things that are portable and function. And unfortunately, these are the compromises we make. But through Skype, through Facebook, digital file transfers, we're able to make this stuff all work throughout the year. As I said, we have a good time. Some things that, we blow off a little steam on a Saturday night. Some pictures that we never speak of. The work, as I said, is year-round. Here's a city set being built in my driveway. This is probably right around May. And come July at GFEST, this was what it looked like. And this is the single street we built, and it was a set on steroids that had the buildings lit up internally. It had Osaka Castle. It had street lights that were all lit up with all the electrical cabling. And we were lucky enough that that was the year Kawakita came. And to just be able to, sort of say, is it okay? And he was like, yes. And we just felt so great to be able to share that with him. And this is him walking in the set. We actually have a miniature Tokyo Tower that's actually too tall to be fully assembled in this room. So this year Dojo expanded a little bit and did some things differently, but now we offer panels, guests, workshops, demonstrations, and then we also make Dojo toys. I always kind of wanted to be a toy maker. I grew up in Ohio, and I was always kind of encouraged by the fact that Kenner Toys was just down in Cincinnati, but then Hasbro bought them and they closed them, and that dream was dashed, and then I had to get a real job. So when digital technology again came around and it manifested itself as 3D printing, I got involved in that. And so this is the first 3D printed GFEST figure. This was a scan with a 3D scanner from that original GFEST Shogun Warriors toy. And a digital image was created of that and then miniaturized and printed into figures that are about this tall. These are the actual production numbers. from the first run. GFEST in multiple colorways. That seems to be something that just draws me into Japanese toys so much, is that you can get a green Godzilla or a pink Godzilla or an orange Godzilla or a red one. And that's just immensely fun to me. These are our first ones. And now, interestingly, I want to point out that this GFEST was also scanned from a physical model. And this is different from the first one I showed that was down here. But this one was made from a physical model that was sculpted by Christopher Biowa, who is not only a suit actor, but he is one of our staff, and he's I mean, he is just, in his own right, he is a fantastic sculptor. And he has some work that he'll be showing a little bit later today in a different panel on 3D design and 3D printing that he and I are co-doing, together, both doing. And so these are the original designs. This was a suit also, this is Giga. He was designed also by Jake Baker, who did the GFEST that you saw in the blue Karuta. And then this is Shirakuna without his wings, but this is my original digital design. And then with a 3D printer, you can just keep going and going and going and going and going. And I don't know how many of these I've made. There are probably about 300 GFEST figures that were 3D printed out there in circulation at this point. Probably more like 200. There are quite a bit. There's some Giga figures in there, a bunch of Shirakuna figures. And I had a really good time making Gara Sharp from the Gamera series. That was a film that was never made. And more importantly, and probably the thing that was one of the first things Dojo did, was to try and recognize things in a unique way in the costume contest. You know, you have Best in Show. Well, what does that mean? Well, I don't know. Some places have special awards. There's the Emmy, the Tony, the Grammy. So why couldn't we have something and call it the Foamy? And all of the Foamy Awards, initially, we started a tradition that every Foamy Award was hand sculpted by a prior Masters competition winner. And that went that way for about 5 years. And then we switched over to a different method of 3D printed Foamy Awards. And this is one of the first ones. This was 3D printed. It was about this tall and sprayed gold. And this has now become the regular thing. In fact, we've increased the Foamy Award to a Foamy Junior as well, because some of the junior costumes are just that good. And we figure if we're going to recognize adults in that way, let's get those kids involved and let's get them thinking about, you know, learning how to do things, because they're the next generation, really. So again, Dojo is a sandbox. Trying to summarize all of this, people bring their talents, their motivation, and every year we have a blast using their talents in new ways and new combinations. So the question is, what are you doing next year? We're always looking for new people. If you think it's something that interests you, stop by and talk to us. We're always looking for new talent. Thank you very much. Do we have questions? The secret Facebook page is a secret.
I think we have a question in the back
so
here.
one of the things we do with the Facebook page is we have our public-facing Dojo Studios Facebook page where we make announcements. Especially we make more announcements as we head closer to GFEST about things that we're going to be doing at GFEST. But the secret Facebook page lets us interact with each other creatively, and we can hash out things that, you know, like maybe we pursue this, or maybe we think we don't want to, you know, have another we don't want 3 monsters in the next one because really, you know, time. Or, you know, maybe we're going to have Portillo's for lunch one day instead of pizza. And so it's a very functional thing. There was another question?
Do you want to ask a question?
Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla wasn't the last one. It was Terror of Mechagodzilla.
Thank you very much. Ouch. You are correct.
You got actually by
I got
by how old are you, my friend?
7.
7.
Nice. Nice. Very, very good listening skills, though.
Any other questions? Oh. No, I don't think so.
All right. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you, everybody.